Let's talk some recruiting. In just a few moments, I'm going to be joined by one of the best recruiting insiders on the Notre Dame beat to go over the fallout from Brandyn Hillman's departure, what the new assistants like Gino, Guidugli, and Rudolph are like on the recruiting trail, plus the latest on 5-stars CJ Carr and Justin Scott. All that and more coming up next on this edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Irish. It is Tuesday, March 14th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. The show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, so if you're watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and if you're listening to the podcast, give it a 5-star rating, review, and of course, subscribe. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I am the host. I've been a Notre Dame fan for my entire life. I graduated from the university in 2018, and I've been podcasting about the football team since 2020. I'm also a producer for college football talent at the Fox Sports headquarters in LA. And in today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Notre Dame recruiting insider Mike Singer from Blue Gold and On3. Mike's been covering recruiting for the past 10 years for Rivals and On3, and he's been on the Notre Dame beat since May of 2019. Mike and I talked about Brandyn Hillman, where Notre Dame goes from here as they try to shore up the back end of their defense, and then we get into what the new coaches on the staff bring to the table on the recruiting trail. And Mike had some really strong opinions about the new quarterbacks coach, Gino Guidugli, in comparison to his predecessor, Tommy Rees. You're going to want to stick around for that. One quick thing I want to mention about recruiting, at least as it pertains to this show, I obviously follow it, and I fully recognize how important recruiting is to winning a national championship in college football. But as for the coverage of it, I'm not a person who keeps track of every single offer Notre Dame puts out there, and I'm not researching every prospect on a daily basis. So when we talk about recruiting on this show, a lot of times it's going to be about commitments and the big picture stuff, like the stuff that's really newsworthy. I understand that some of you absolutely love recruiting coverage and know all the ins and outs of it, and that's great. There's certainly a market for that, but on this show, we'll probably do recruiting check-ins periodically and react to the big stories on that front when necessary, like the Brandyn Hillman situation, for example. I just feel like I needed to mention that so you have an understanding of how it's going to be covered on this show, because every outlet kind of does it differently, because I think the way people consume it is just it's just different on a person-to-person basis. So, all right, now we got that out of the way. Let's bring on someone who knows way more about recruiting than I do. All right, Mike Singer from Blue Gold and On3 joins us now. It's been a long time since we've done this, man. How have you been?
Good. I'm doing good, Tyler. It's good to be on the Locked On Irish podcast with you, my friend.
I know. I'm glad to have you over here. And let's start with the big news from Sunday. 4-star Brandyn Hillman announced that he asked for and was granted his release from his national letter of intent with Notre Dame. What could you tell us about that situation?
He got his release from his letter of intent from Notre Dame. And
Thank you.
He's out on, the prowl, and, he's got a bunch of new offers as he's been posting on social media. This is what his recruitment would have been if he was discovered earlier. He didn't pick up his first offer right before until his senior season of high school. I think it was June of 2022 or something. Norfolk State offered, and then he kind of blew up late. Notre Dame offered. He takes his official commit soon afterwards. I'm sure all your people listening to this or watching this will have their opinions on why he's, is not able to go to Notre Dame. And I think we can kind of just leave it at that. But yeah, it's not ideal news for Notre Dame. I mean, he was a player who the staff was very, very excited about. One of the high-ranked guys in the class. Even though when Notre Dame offered, I'm sure people were like, why the heck are we offering this unranked kid with no good offers? But now you know why. And he's a darn good player. And Notre Dame's going to, miss having him moving forward, because they had big plans for him.
Were you surprised by this news, or were there any rumblings beforehand that his status with Notre Dame might be uncertain?
I was surprised. Yeah, did not see that one coming.
All right, so it sounds like, and I don't want to speculate too much, it sounds like he was in a situation where he was towing the line between getting in and not getting in academically. Not speaking specifically to Hellman, is that sort of a situation that Notre Dame finds itself in often with recruits? Like, are a lot of guys sort of, like, do they have to take it to the very end where guys are really close to getting admitted and, they have to wait until, it's March now, right?
Yeah, but if the kid's toeing the line and does get in, that story's not getting out. Like who's reporting on the I'm not reporting on. I don't really like to talk about these kids' academics. I mean, like it's unless it's they're a 4.0 student and that's a big deal to them, and that's good. That's good to talk about. But if it's on the other side of things, Tyler, I mean, like, dude, I don't know. I'm in the business where my job is to report on 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. It's already kind of a weird thing. And so the last thing I want to do is talk about oh, so and so's girlfriend wants him to go here. I'm like, bro, I'm not doing that. So academics, you know, yeah, like I said, if it's close and he gets in, no one's talking about it. But if it's close and he doesn't get in, it's a big story. Everyone wants to talk about it. I'm sure that it happens more on the side of they get in than they don't. But again, this is something that happened. We're talking about it. It's a big story, but I'm sure it outweighs the times the players do get in when it's the toe on the line, like you said. I mean, Tyler, I can't remember the last time that this has happened for Notre Dame. I don't know if like a player signed with Notre Dame then didn't get in because of academics since I started covering Notre Dame at least. There's not one that I can think of.
Yeah, it's certainly been a while, and it's really been a long time since Notre Dame had any big issue like this academically with a player. But there was a stretch there from like 2013 to 2016 before you were on the beat where it felt like every few months there was this big news story. I mean, the first one, the big one, obviously, Everett Golson, the starting quarterback, he got kicked out of school. Alize Mack got suspended for a semester because of academics. Greg Bryant, same deal. Jerian Grant on the basketball team, but still academics for the reason that he got suspended. So it's been a while, but this does happen. But moving off, it's part of the deal. Notre Dame needed to sign multiple safeties in the class of 24 before the Hellman news, and now that position is even more of a priority than before. Who are some prospects in the class of 24 that Notre Dame is looking at to fill this need?
Yeah, I mean, so Hillman, I think most of us thought he'd end up as a safety. I know he wanted to give quarterback a try. I personally think his best position would probably been Rover, but starting out safety would have been likely for him. There's definitely a few guys. I think Marquise Gallegos is probably the one who's near the top of the board that Notre Dame's got a decent shot with. And then after him, Kennedy Urlacher, Brian Urlacher's son, he's a top safety target for Notre Dame, as is Davis Andrews from American Fork, Utah. Both guys do seem to be, these hard-hitting safety types that people think, they're just going to end up a linebacker. Notre Dame's recruiting both as a safety for now, and then we'll kind of see what it looks like moving forward. But there's other guys that they've offered, but I would say those three for now are kind of like the top names to watch at safety for 2024.
Do you think that they're looking to get 3 to maybe 4 guys now, or do you think they'll probably try to just get 2?
It's interesting. Whenever I talk to sources, they kind of will just lump in corners and safeties together because so many are versatile and can play both. I was told, and I've reported such at Blue and Gold, that the number of total is going to be about 6 defensive backs, which is a lot. But and I was told about 2 is probably what Notre Dame takes at safety. But with the Hillman news, and if they really were planning them at safety, you could certainly see that number going up to 3.
What about in the class of 2022? Is there any chance that a guy like Mike Abell could move to safety? I know he's a traditional corner, same with Gray, but I mean, kind of desperate times here.
Yeah, you're talking about this past class 2023.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. Bell checked in at All-American Bowl, pretty small. He was, one of the smaller guys out there, and he's also standing next to all these All-Americans. So, yeah, it's like if I started to get fit and was working out, and then I go to a bodybuilding competition, I might not look as good. That's not a.
I don't know. I wouldn't sell yourself short there, Mike.
It's not a perfect apples to apples scenario. Obviously, Bell's an All-American himself, and I'm not a bodybuilder, but you guys get what I'm saying. Yeah, Christian Gray's got the twitchiness and ranginess to play safety. I think he could play really anywhere in the defensive backfield. I remember seeing him 7-on-7, and he was working out as a middle linebacker. Like, obviously, that's just 7-on-7, but still, like, you could just kind of see the overall football smarts from him. So yeah, he could definitely play it I mean, there's multiple corners on Notre Dame's team that I think could move over to safety, like a Ryan Barnes, Clarence Lewis. I think all those guys kind of have the range to move out there. But with the Don Schuler and Ben Minnick in the 23 class, you do have a couple of 4-star safeties who Notre Dame is pretty excited about. And as far as the immediate help, Thomas Harper is a big addition for Notre Dame in the offseason. I was told that he was brought in to replace both Tariq Bracy and Brandon Joseph in a way, like he can play both nickel and safety for Notre Dame.
We'll be right back with Mike in a moment, but first, I want to talk about FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and threes made. For my pick tonight, I'm going to do a same-game parlay. Haven't done one of those yet on here, so let's give it a shot. I'll take the Lakers money line over the Pelicans, plus let's throw in the over on Anthony Davis's points and block shots. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. That's what I just did. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's move off Hillman and talk about the new assistants on the staff. Gerad Parker is obviously not a new assistant. He's been on the staff for over a year now as the tight ends coach, but he's new to the role of offensive coordinator. What can you tell us about the job he's done on the recruiting trail up to this point?
Yeah, I remember when he was first hired, I talked to someone who was familiar with him as a recruiter and called him a war daddy.
Yeah, that's been floating around. I had never heard that phrase ever prior to this, but I've heard it like 10 times since he got
I haven't heard it since, and I don't really know what it means, but I like it. I like it, Tyler. Well, war daddy.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. He gets after it. When the coaches are out on the recruiting trail, he'd be stopping in, seeing the top tight ends, but otherwise the dude stopping in like Chattanooga, Tennessee, Nashville, down to Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte and South Carolina. Don't get me wrong, I love Tennessee and in the Carolinas, but not like the most glamorous recruiting areas. And the guy just is a grinder, though. Like he's getting after it on the recruiting trail. In the interim period after Reese left, he was getting involved before Gino Guidugli was named quarterbacks coach. He was working for Notre Dame, recruiting 2025 quarterbacks, and the ball's getting rolling there for the Irish pretty well. He's just a strong recruiter, solid guy, good Southern dude. Love his accent. Love a coach who says shucks in a press conference. Good recruiter. I think that the Parker Guidugli combo will be an upgrade for Notre Dame on the trail.
Okay, I want to get to that in a second, but you raised an interesting point there when you mentioned like after Tommy Reese had left and how Gerad Parker kind of came in and started talking to some of the recruits. How did Marcus Freeman handle the fallout with recruits once the news broke about Reese leaving? Because not only was he trying to find a new offensive coordinator, he also had to basically fan the flames to tell all the recruits who were committed or were considering Notre Dame that things were going to be okay. How did Freeman handle that?
Yeah, I mean, the commits, and Tyler, I know we'll talk about CJ Carr, so I won't touch on that now, but at running back, receiver, tight end, offensive line, those commits were just like, hey, I think the thought was like, my position coach is here, and I'm bought into Marcus Freeman's vision, so I'm good. Like, I mean, the commits are like, yeah, good. Even Peter Jones, offensive line recruit or commit for the Irish, he lost his offensive coordinator and O-line coach in the span of a week. He seems to still be going strong with the Irish as well. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of just business as usual, really. I mean, and it's not like Notre Dame was really like Reese was not doing much for 2025 quarterback recruiting. I don't know what the heck he had been doing on the recruiting trail, to be honest with you, in the past couple months. When, I'm doing all these coaches on the road reports for, mid-December and then, for a couple weeks in January, he was just seemed to be going to Chicago every single day. I mean, you just hanging out in your stomping grounds? Like, I didn't really know what he was doing. So I just think that.
Wait, are you talking about before the bowl game in December?
Both.
Like, okay, so
before and after.
Is it possible that he was entertaining potential grad transfer quarterbacks that might not have been in the transfer portal already?
He definitely was seeing some of those guys in December.
Because I remember when that was going around, all the coaches and people are like, "Where's Reese?" And then they're like,
Yeah.
it
And
was
yeah, everyone's
all
like,
about
"Oh,
the
the"
transfer
he
quarterbacks.
was doing one of two things. He was interviewing for other jobs, or he was like, that was at the time. That's what everyone was saying. He's interviewing for other jobs, or he's going to see some of these transfer portal quarterbacks, which Notre Dame wanted to keep off the radar. I know Hudson Card, 100% sure that that's a player that he went and saw. He did not go and see Sam Hartman because Hartman was not in the transfer portal at that point, but there were some others. So yeah, he was doing that in December, but there was also like a majority of his time in January. I'm like, he's just in Chicago all the time. And I get that was his recruiting area, but Notre Dame's not recruiting Chicago that hard. So I just think that the Parker Guidugli combo is going to be more of a Marcus Freeman recruiting style than Reese. I think Reese might have been more of a Brian Kelly, you know, more of the Brian Kelly influence. And I think Guidugli and Parker will be more of the Marcus Freeman influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what about Guidugli? Like, what's his style like that makes him more suited to Freeman's recruiting approach?
In terms of style, like that's gonna take some time, right? I mean, I'm just kind of going based off what I've heard before than anything we've seen yet. But when Marcus Freeman is going to his, you know, little coaching tree, right? These guys he's worked with, that tells me what I need to know. Like Marcus Freeman trusts these guys, and recruiting is such a big part of what he's looking for in an assistant coach. So if he hires him, you got to think they're a pretty good recruiter. Now I know the jury is still going to be out for these guys, and Al Washington, the defensive line coach, Notre Dame fans are, you know, at least the vocal minority, or maybe
Yeah,
it's a
I know what you mean.
majority. Yeah, they're not too fired up about Al Washington, and he's from that coaching tree. Of guys that Freeman's worked with at Cincinnati, but still, for the most part, these are guys Freeman's worked with and he trusts.
Okay, so one guy that Freeman hasn't worked a ton with is Joe Rudolph, and I have no doubt that Rudolph will be more aggressive on the recruiting trail compared to Harry Hiestand. But I'm more curious to see if the types of players that Rudolph is looking for are much different than Hiestand, because I think that would have more to do with their philosophy of what makes a great offensive lineman. So what are the early impressions of Rudolph so far since he got the Notre Dame job?
Yeah, I know he's been keeping in contact with some offensive line recruits, and it's going to be a big spring for him for when these guys actually get up to campus. And yeah, does the offensive line board expand? Because it expanded after Hiestand left and before Rudolph was hired, which was interesting. When we're talking about the day after Hiestand retires, they're already offering offensive line coaches. Then people might ask, well, was Joe Rudolph already secretly hired and they were just throwing out those? No, no.
Yeah,
Like you
there
don't
was a
have
guy
these
named Matt
things.
Luke who got
Yeah.
entertained before.
Yeah, right. So yeah, they're looking at Matt Luke before Rudolph. So yeah, I was like, were those Matt Luke offer? Like we can't, no. So yeah, in terms of him as a recruiter, just seems like a good, solid dude. I mean, all these they're just on paper. When I talk to people, everyone's just raving about these guys. Like Rudolph is he's consistent but not overbearing, is what one parent of a former target of his at Wisconsin told me. Yeah, I mean Joe Rudolph, I think is I wrote this in an article breaking down him as a recruiter at Blue and Gold, I think a week or two ago. I think he's got the good of both Harry Hiestand and Jeff Quinn. He's got the energy of a recruiter that Quinn has, but also the experience in building an offensive line tradition like Rudolph did at Wisconsin. That's similar to Harry. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good outlook.
Yeah, that's actually good to hear. And for all the criticism aimed at Quinn as a developer of offensive linemen, the guy could recruit.
Blake Fisher, Joe Wall.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly. Who recruited him? So that's good to hear. All right, I got a few more questions here as we wrap this up. The ones I have to ask you, CJ Carr. I know fans ask about him constantly, and that's probably going to continue through December. Honestly, I know he said that Reese leaving won't change anything, and he's 100% confident Marcus Freeman. That's great and all. He spoke recently. I feel like until he gets a strong declaration saying, no, I'm coming to Notre Dame, no doubt, fans are going to be left wondering. So what's the latest on his status with Notre Dame?
Yeah, I'll tell your audience what I've told mine at Blue and Gold. Look, he's committed to Notre Dame. He doesn't have to do anything. He can delete his social media tomorrow, never talk to any media again, and just sign on National Signing Day with Notre Dame. He owes us absolutely nothing. He doesn't
Agreed.
have to
Totally
do
agree.
anything. But when he does talk and he does post on social media, and if it's not hey, I'm 1000% with Notre Dame after these coaching hires, like I'm good, then it's 1000% free to speculate or be a little bit concerned about the status of his commitment. I posted an article at blueandgold.com from an interview with On3 Sam Spiegelman with Carr on that interview was from Saturday. I posted the article Sunday morning
Right.
or afternoon. And it sounded fine, but it was just kind of neutral to me. It wasn't like, oh, he's leaving or, oh, he's 100% good. It's kind of like, I don't really know what to take from it. So do I think that CJ is going to be fine and stick with Notre Dame? Yes, I do. Do I think it's fair to be a little bit concerned? Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I understand it from his perspective where he's like, look, they hired these guys. He probably knows Parker a little bit, but he doesn't know Guidugli at all. Like,
Dooley offered him when he was at Cincinnati. I know he visited the Bearcats too, but yeah, I get it from his point of view. When the Reese news broke, my understanding is that his phone just went nuts. Not only do you have,
which makes sense.
Totally makes sense. You got the media hitting you up, but more than the media, every college coach in America is still looking for a 2024 quarterback sitting Carr up. So I think he just kind of took a step back from it. He just wants to play 7-on-7 with his buddies and just kind of focus on that. So yeah, like I said, he's got every right to do whatever the heck he wants to do. But so do I, and being like,
Yeah.
how solid is he? Like what does that mean moving forward? We'll just have to see, Tyler.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of time for Parker and Guidugli to develop a strong relationship so that he doesn't waver with his commitment. All right, another one. Justin Scott, 5-star defensive tackle from nearby Chicago. There was a point in January where everything was pointing to him committing at the end of the month. He had a date set and everything. And then Georgia offered. And then that commitment date went out the window. And it's been pretty quiet on that front ever since. Is Notre Dame even still in the running for Scott anymore?
Definitely in the running. Definitely in the running. And I'm going to be honest with you, Tyler. Sometimes my hunches on things are correct. Sometimes they're very incorrect. My hunch on Scott was 1000% on point. I'm even going to give myself a pat on the back. This is not, it was not a good hunch for Notre Dame fans, but I've seen it happen so many times in my decade now. Last week marked my decade of covering college football recruiting.
Did you get a plaque?
What's that, Tyler?
Did you get a plaque?
No,
something. It's in the mail.
Not yet. I'll see if my wife will make me one. But like when a player says, "Hey, I'm going to commit at this point," and then they rush it randomly to like in 2 weeks. Now I'm committing. Oftentimes that's like, all right, he knows where he's going. Like he's already locked in. But then he did it. Like I was told that he didn't. And even though all these predictions were going in for him to land at Notre Dame, he had not given that good old quote unquote silent commitment. So I'm thinking to myself, he rushed his commitment date so he can announce on his birthday, but doesn't know where he's going. I think he's gonna push this back. It's just exactly what he did. He was maybe gonna visit Notre Dame multiple times and didn't in January. I was like, this is just not gonna happen. It didn't happen. Georgia offers. That didn't help Notre Dame's chances either. But I still think even if Georgia didn't offer, I still think you would have pushed this back.
Okay.
So, and now it looks like he's going to take an OV to Georgia in April. I'd probably peg the Bulldogs as the leader right now. And that will be a fun day if that happens. Now, to answer your other question, is Notre Dame in the running? Absolutely. And if you talk to some people on Notre Dame, Irish still think that they're in the lead for Scott. But I don't see it working out for Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's understandable. I guess I could understand why a 5-star defensive tackle would want to go to Georgia. They've had a decent recent track record with defensive linemen over there. All right, so last one on the way out. Is there any 5-star on the table for Notre Dame in this class outside of the ones we just mentioned, Carr and Scott?
5-star on the table. I think Ryan Wingo, the receiver from St. Louis, it just depends on what website you're looking at. I mean, he's close to a 5-star. Like, is Carr even a 5-star anymore? I don't know. depends on
They're like both fringe. So
Yeah, they're
for the
fringe.
sake
Yeah,
of
so
this
Ryan
question, though,
Wingo.
we're going to include Wingo in the 5-star.
Yeah, Jaden Rodell's a tight end who's on the same 7-on-7 team as Carr. You would like to think the Carr's recruiting him to Notre Dame. He's a fringe 5-star. I think On3 has him as the number 1 tight end nationally. So I'd put him in there. Gerby Lambert is a fringe 5-star guy from the Boston area, offensive tackle. Notre Dame is in the mix for him. That might be it.
All right, well, that's all I got. Tell the people where they can find you.
At Mike T. Singer. That's my Twitter, blueandgold.com. We always have good promos going on there. You're definitely going to head to the website for spring ball coverage. Listen to our podcasts and whatnot. In addition to Tyler Wojciak, because Tyler always does a fantastic job. And back to his days at the old place, I would like to say that I am the most recurring guest.
Yeah, you still have that title, and now you're on Locked On Irish. Your debut.
Can we add that to the plaque, Tyler?
Yes,
can we add most recurring guest to the plaque?
I'll make sure that gets included. Well, it's always great having you on, man. Thanks so much for the time, and let's not wait so long before we do this again, all right?
Sounds good, my friend.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. On the way out, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts if you haven't already, and give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Irish, on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal Twitter account at Tyler Wojciak. That's at Tyler, Wojciak. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball, where experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court, plus hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. That's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you guys tomorrow.